The quality of your life is not determined by what you say, but by what you do when no one's watching. Ever notice how the most influential people in the room often speak the least? They've mastered something far more powerful than words: the art of silent command. What was the moment in your life when you realized actions truly speak louder than words? Look at the person to your right, now look at the person to your left. One of you will achieve extraordinary success while the others will wonder what happened. The difference won't be talent. It won't be opportunities. It will be the simple daily decisions you make when facing resistance. The truth that changes everything is this: you don't need words to outsmart everyone around you. You need something far more potent: the silent power of personal mastery. Consider this. Anyone can talk about success. The bookstores are filled with advice. The world is drowning in empty promises and hollow rhetoric. Yet how many people do you know who have truly mastered themselves, who have conquered their impulses, who have developed the discipline to do what others won't? These rare individuals possess something no words can fake: personal power. It radiates from them without a single syllable uttered. It commands respect without demanding it. It influences without manipulation. I was once that person who believed success came from having the right thing to say. I studied persuasion techniques, rehearsed clever phrases, and collected impressive facts. Then I met someone who changed everything for me with nothing but silence. He was the wealthiest person in the room, yet said almost nothing during the entire business meeting. While others jockeyed for attention with words, he simply observed. When he finally made one small suggestion, everyone leaned in. One sentence carried more weight than an hour of everyone else's chatter. That day I realized the profound truth: personal mastery is the ultimate form of influence. What if I told you the most powerful force in your life isn't what you say to others, but what you say to yourself and then act upon without fail? Would that change how you approach tomorrow morning? Would it transform what you do with the next hour? The foundation of outsmarting anyone without words begins with a single principle: self-discipline creates options that the undisciplined will never have. Think about this for a moment. When you've mastered yourself, your emotions, your habits, your time, you operate from a position of strength that others can sense. You gain freedom others don't have. While they're slaves to impulse, you choose your response. While they react, you strategize. While they talk, you observe and learn. This silent advantage compounds over time. Every day you choose the difficult path of discipline, you separate yourself further from the masses. Every morning you rise early while others sleep. Every evening you study while others are distracted. Every moment you control your emotions while others explode. The gap widens. And here's the remarkable thing about this advantage: it cannot be faked. In a world of endless posturing and empty words, personal mastery cuts through the noise like nothing else. Consider two types of people walking into a room. The first talks confidently about their abilities, makes grand promises, and impresses with clever phrases. The second says little but carries themselves with quiet confidence born from countless hours of preparation and personal discipline. Who commands more respect? Who do people ultimately trust with important matters? The world is tired of words. We're surrounded by talkers. What we hunger for, what we respect above all else, is the person whose actions speak so loudly we can barely hear what they're saying. You see, outsmarting others isn't about being cleverer with your words. It's about operating on a different playing field altogether. While others focus on what to say, you focus on who to become. A farmer understands this principle perfectly. He knows that no amount of talking to his fields will produce a crop. Only proper cultivation, consistent effort, and patience yield results. You can stand in your field talking about the harvest all day long, but without planting seeds and tending to them daily, your words are nothing but wind. Your life responds to the same natural laws. The seeds of discipline, focus, and consistency you plant today become the harvest of advantage you reap tomorrow. I once worked with a man named Robert who struggled to influence his team. He tried motivational speeches, incentives, threats. His words fell on deaf ears. His business was failing despite his eloquence. I asked him a simple question: what are you doing when no one is watching you? He looked confused. So I clarified: your team doesn't need to hear another word from you. They need to see who you are when you think no one is looking. 6 months later, his business had turned around completely. What changed? Not his words, his actions. He started arriving first and leaving last. He stopped asking his team to do anything he wasn't willing to do himself. He became the embodiment of the standards he expected. His influence multiplied without adding a single new persuasion technique to his vocabulary. This is the first fundamental truth about outsmarting others without words. Personal example has a force that no argument can match. But there's something deeper here, something few people ever realize about personal mastery. When you commit to disciplining yourself, you develop an unshakable inner strength that becomes your greatest asset in any situation. Think about this. When you've conquered the voice in your head that says quit, when you've mastered your impulses and emotions, when you've developed the ability to do what's necessary regardless of how you feel, what power can anyone else have over you? None. Your silent power flows from this inner strength. People sense it. They respect it. They respond to it even if they don't understand why. Consider how quickly you can identify someone with real personal power versus someone who just talks a good game. It takes mere seconds. We've all developed an innate radar for detecting substance versus show. That's why the person of few words but consistent action wields influence that no smooth talker can match. Their very presence communicates something words cannot: reliability, trustworthiness, competence. The question isn't whether you can outsmart others with clever words. The question is, have you built the inner strength that naturally commands respect without saying anything at all? This brings us to another crucial aspect of personal mastery: the compound effect of small habits. Most people dramatically overestimate what they can accomplish in a day, and dramatically underestimate what they can accomplish in a year through small, consistent actions. What if you improved yourself just 1% each day? Almost imperceptible daily progress. After 1 year, you would be 37 times better, not 365% better, 37 times better, because small improvements compound exponentially. While others look for the grand gesture, the big break, the lucky chance, you quietly focus on daily disciplines that seem insignificant in the moment but transform everything over time. Read 10 pages of a good book daily. After 1 year, you've consumed over 3,600 pages, equivalent to 12 mentor 15 books. That puts you ahead of 95% of the population in annual reading. Save a small amount consistently. While others talk about financial freedom but spend everything they make, your disciplined habit silently builds wealth that eventually speaks louder than any words could. Control your reactions in moments of stress. While others damage relationships with impulsive words, your emotional discipline builds trust and influence that money cannot buy. These simple disciplines, practiced daily, when no one is watching, create an unmistakable advantage that requires no explanation or promotion. The results eventually speak for themselves. I know a woman who built a multi-million-dollar business without ever giving a speech or writing a book. While her competitors spent fortunes on advertising and bold claims, she focused exclusively on delivering exceptional quality and service. Her customers became her evangelists. Her results did all the talking necessary. When asked how she outsmarted much larger competitors with massive marketing budgets, she simply said, "While they were saying how good they were, I was busy being good at what I do." That's the essence of outsmarting others without words. But personal mastery offers another silent advantage few recognize. It gives you leverage in every human interaction. When you need nothing from others, when your sense of worth doesn't depend on their approval, when your happiness doesn't require their cooperation, when your success doesn't demand their support, you negotiate from a position of tremendous strength. Most people enter interactions needing something: validation, agreement, approval, business. This need creates weakness that others can sense and exploit. But the person who has mastered themselves carries no such vulnerability. This is why the ancient wisdom teaches, "He who conquers himself is greater than he who conquers 1,000 in battle." Self-mastery gives you the ultimate leverage, the ability to walk away from any situation that doesn't align with your values or serve your purpose. When others sense this independence, your influence naturally increases. Consider how differently you'd approach negotiations if you genuinely needed nothing from the other party. How would your demeanor change? Your confidence, your willingness to state your true terms. This quiet confidence can't be faked. It emerges naturally from knowing that your success depends on your disciplines, not on any particular person or opportunity. I remember watching two business owners approach potential investors. The first was desperate for funding, and despite using all the right words and making impressive promises, the investors declined. The second had built his business through disciplined reinvestment of profits. He approached investors with a take-it-or-leave-it proposition. Their funds would accelerate his already successful model, but he didn't need their money to survive. Every investor fought for the opportunity to participate. Same market, similar businesses, dramatically different outcomes. The difference wasn't in their words, but in the position of strength from which they operated. This is the practical application of personal mastery in creating influence without words. But there's something even more subtle at work when you develop this silent power. You begin to notice things others miss, opportunities, patterns, warnings, because you're not busy talking or worrying about what to say next. The disciplined mind becomes like still water, capable of reflecting reality accurately, while others see only the turbulence of their own thoughts projected onto the world. When you're not controlled by impulses, when you've developed the discipline to observe before reacting, you see what's actually happening, rather than what you wish was happening. This clarity becomes another form of silent advantage. Most people move through life reacting to their circumstances. They feel justified in their responses but never question whether their perception is accurate. The person who has mastered themselves first asks, "Am I seeing this situation clearly? Or am I seeing it through the lens of my fears, desires, or past experiences?" This discipline of mind reveals options and opportunities invisible to reactive thinkers. What if the situation that seems like a problem is actually a doorway to something better? What if the person who appears to be an opponent could become an ally? What if the apparent setback contains the very solution you need? Only the disciplined mind can entertain these possibilities, because only the disciplined mind can suspend judgment long enough to see beyond immediate appearances. And this brings us to perhaps the most powerful aspect of personal mastery, the ability to choose your response regardless of circumstance. Between what happens to you and how you respond lies a space. In that space is your power to choose. In your choice lies your growth and freedom. Most people are unconsciously controlled by their circumstances. Something good happens, they feel good. Something bad happens, they feel bad. Their emotional state is determined entirely by external events. But what if you develop the discipline to maintain your purpose, perspective, and power regardless of circumstance? What if you could choose your response rather than merely react? This is the ultimate expression of personal mastery. It's not that you don't experience emotions, it's that you aren't controlled by them. You feel disappointment but choose to learn rather than complain. You experience rejection but choose to improve rather than blame. You face obstacles but choose to persist rather than quit. When others observe this quality in you, this ability to maintain your center in the storm, they recognize something rare and valuable. Your example speaks volumes without a single word. I witnessed this quality in action during a corporate crisis. The company was facing bankruptcy. During an emergency board meeting, everyone was panicking, blaming, and catastrophizing, except one person, the CFO. A man known for his personal disciplines and emotional control, quietly worked through the numbers while others argued. When he finally spoke, he didn't offer empty reassurances or join the blame game. He simply presented three viable options with the potential consequences of each. The room fell silent. His calm competence, born from years of personal mastery, created a space for rational decision-making in the midst of chaos. The company not only survived but emerged stronger because one person refused to be controlled by the crisis. His influence in that moment and thereafter was incalculable, not because of his words, but because of who he had become through countless private disciplines when no one was watching. This is the promise of personal mastery, the ability to influence any situation not through clever talk, but through the power of your example, the clarity of your perception, and the wisdom of your chosen response. The path begins with a simple question: who are you becoming when no one is watching? What private disciplines are you practicing that will inevitably shape your public impact? Because make no mistake, what you do in private ultimately shapes what you achieve in public. The seeds you plant in the garden of your habits will produce a harvest for all to see. And as you develop this silent power, you'll discover something remarkable. You don't need to outsmart others with words. because your life speaks a language more compelling than anything you could say. Your results become your voice. Your character becomes your influence. Your disciplines become your advantage. The difference between those who influence others and those who are influenced lies in one critical factor: observation. While most people are busy formulating what to say next, the strategic mind is watching, learning, and gathering intelligence that becomes power. Have you ever noticed that certain people seem to predict outcomes before they happen? They appear almost prescient, but their advantage isn't supernatural, it's strategic. Personal mastery forms the foundation, but strategic thinking is the architecture that transforms that foundation into a structure of influence. The person who understands human behavior patterns gains an advantage that no amount of talking can match. Consider this: every person in your life operates according to patterns. They have consistent triggers, predictable responses, and habitual ways of making decisions. Most never notice these patterns in others, or even in themselves. But when you develop the discipline to observe rather than merely react, these patterns become visible. I once watched a master negotiator sit through an entire meeting without contributing a single word for the first hour. When asked later why he remained silent, he said something profound: "I needed to understand who was in the room before deciding what needed to be said." During that hour of observation, he identified the decision maker, not the most talkative person, recognized the primary concerns, not the stated objectives, and mapped the relationships between participants. When he finally spoke, his few sentences addressed the unspoken needs of the true decision maker. The room was stunned by how accurately he had assessed the situation. The deal closed within minutes. No lengthy persuasion needed. This is the first element of the strategic mind: the ability to see what others miss, because you've disciplined yourself to observe before acting. Most people enter situations with preconceived notions and prepared scripts. They're so focused on implementing their agenda that they miss crucial information. The strategic thinker enters with questions rather than statements. What's really happening here? Who holds the true power? What are the unstated needs? What patterns are at play? Think about the last significant interaction you had. How much did you truly observe versus how much time did you spend thinking about what to say next? For most, the answer reveals a tremendous missed opportunity. The strategic mind understands a fundamental truth: you cannot influence what you do not understand. Observation comes before effective action. This principle applies universally in business, relationships, negotiations, even conflict. The person who takes time to truly understand the terrain before advancing gains an insurmountable advantage. I know a woman who built an international consulting practice without ever advertising or promoting herself. Her method was deceptively simple. She would enter her clients' organizations and spend days just observing the operations, asking questions, and listening. No premature diagnoses, no packaged solutions. By the time she offered recommendations, she understood the organization's needs better than many insiders. Her solutions addressed root causes rather than symptoms. Word spread, and soon companies were competing for her attention rather than the other way around. Her competitive edge wasn't superior knowledge or experience. It was superior observation. While others rushed to demonstrate expertise, she disciplined herself to understand first. This brings us to the second component of strategic thinking: preparation versus reaction. Most people live reactively. They respond to whatever demands their immediate attention. They deal with problems as they arise. They improvise their way through life, proud of their ability to think on their feet. The strategic mind operates differently. It anticipates rather than reacts. It prepares systematically for important interactions rather than winging it. Consider the difference between two salespeople approaching the same opportunity. The reactive salesperson reviews their standard pitch before the meeting, perhaps customizing a few points based on the prospect's industry. The strategic salesperson researches not just the company, but the specific individuals they'll meet. They study the decision maker's background, previous statements, and career history. They analyze recent company challenges and opportunities. They prepare responses for potential objections. They identify mutual connections who can provide insight. Who do you think will be more influential? The person with a polished pitch or the person with deep understanding? This isn't just about sales. It's about any situation where your goal is to influence outcomes. When you prepare thoroughly while others react instinctively, you operate with information and options they simply don't have. Your actions seem almost prescient to them because you've thought several moves ahead. The chess master doesn't just see the current board, they see potential future configurations. The strategic thinker doesn't just address current circumstances, they anticipate future developments. This preparation need not be complex. Often asking yourself 3 simple questions creates substantial advantage. What does success look like in this situation? What obstacles or resistance might I encounter? What information or resources would significantly improve my position? These questions, answered honestly before important interactions, can transform your effectiveness. I once mentored an executive who was frustrated by his inability to influence his board of directors. His presentations were excellent, his logic sound, yet his proposals rarely gained traction. After observing one meeting, the problem became clear. He was presenting solutions before the board fully appreciated the problems these solutions addressed. He was answering questions nobody was asking yet. We developed a simple preparation strategy. Before each board meeting, he would prepare not just his proposal, but a thorough analysis of each board member's primary concerns and perspectives. He would then sequence his presentation to address these concerns before presenting his recommendations. The result, his influence increased dramatically, not because he became more persuasive, but because he became more strategic in how he presented information. This brings us to another powerful principle of strategic thinking, creating value before seeking reward. In any interaction where you wish to influence outcomes, there's a fundamental question that determines your approach. Are you trying to get something, or are you trying to give something? Most people focus primarily on what they want: the sale, the agreement, the promotion, the relationship. This creates an energy of extraction that others can sense and resist. The strategic mind reverses this approach. It focuses first on creating genuine value, knowing that influence naturally flows to those who contribute something meaningful. When you enter interactions focused on what you can contribute rather than what you can get, you sidestep resistance and create receptivity. You transform the dynamic from transaction to collaboration. I witnessed this principle in action through a business owner who transformed a struggling company in a highly competitive industry. While competitors fought over the same customers with aggressive tactics and price wars, he took a different approach. He identified the most significant unmet need in his market and dedicated his company to solving that specific problem. He developed free educational resources to help potential customers address related challenges. He created systems that delivered value before asking for commitment. Within 3 years, he wasn't competing for customers. Customers were competing for his attention. He didn't need clever closing techniques or high-pressure tactics. His strategic focus on creating value first naturally positioned him as the preferred provider. This principle extends beyond business. In any context where you wish to have influence, family, community, workplace, the question remains: are you focused more on what you want or on what you can contribute? The answer determines whether you'll need to persuade with words or whether your actions will create natural influence. Closely related to this principle is another strategic advantage: patience and timing. In a world obsessed with instant results, the strategic mind understands the power of proper timing. Sometimes the most influential action is waiting for the right moment. Consider how often opportunities are missed or damaged by premature action. The job candidate who negotiates salary before establishing value. The entrepreneur who scales before refining their model. The person who speaks before reading the room. Strategic patience isn't passive, it's intensely active. While waiting for the right moment, you observe, prepare, and build capacity. You position yourself for maximum effectiveness when the time comes. I know an investor who studied a particular market segment for 3 years before making his first acquisition. While others rushed in during the initial excitement, he patiently observed, analyzed patterns, and built relationships with key players. When the inevitable market correction came, he was positioned perfectly, not just with capital but with knowledge and relationships that allowed him to acquire distressed assets at extraordinary value. His colleagues called him lucky, but luck had nothing to do with it. His advantage came from strategic patience, the discipline to wait for opportunity to align with preparation. This same principle applies in everyday interactions. The person who can listen completely before responding, who can withhold judgment until understanding is complete, who can wait for the right moment rather than the first moment. This person influences without a word. There's tremendous power in being the last to speak in a meeting. While others rush to demonstrate knowledge or stake positions, the patient observer gathers information that informs a more complete response. Next time you're in an important meeting, try this experiment. Discipline yourself to speak only after everyone else has shared their perspective. Listen completely to each person. Note not just their words, but the concerns and values behind their words. When you finally speak, address the complete picture rather than just your perspective. Watch how differently your contribution is received compared to those who jumped in early with partial understanding. This relates directly to another strategic advantage, emotional self-control. In any interaction, the person with the greatest emotional control typically has the greatest influence. While reactions are instinctive, responses are strategic. Most people allow their emotions to dictate their actions, particularly under pressure. They become defensive when criticized, aggressive when threatened, and impulsive when excited. Their effectiveness fluctuates with their emotional state. The strategic mind recognizes emotions as information rather than instructions. You feel anger. That's information about a boundary being crossed or a value being threatened. You feel excitement. That's information about an opportunity aligning with your interests. But what you do with that information remains a strategic choice, not an emotional reaction. I once observed a CEO handle a crisis meeting where his leadership team was reporting a major product failure that would cost millions to address. Some executives were defensive, others were pointing fingers, emotions were running high. The CEO listened quietly, asking clarifying questions without revealing his own reaction. When he finally spoke, he said something unexpected. Before we discuss solutions, I want to acknowledge that many of you must be feeling tremendous pressure right now. That's appropriate given the situation. But our response can't come from that pressure. It must come from our values and strategic priorities. With that simple statement, he shifted the entire dynamic from emotional reaction to strategic response. The team developed a solution that not only addressed the immediate crisis, but strengthened customer relationships in the process. His influence in that moment didn't come from positional authority alone. It came from emotional self-control that created space for strategic thinking when others were trapped in reactivity. The most persuasive argument you'll ever make won't come from your mouth but from your results. In a world drowning in promises, nothing speaks more powerfully than consistent performance. When was the last time someone's track record influenced you more than their words? Strategic thinking gives you the advantage in moment-to-moment interactions, but to create lasting influence, the kind that continues working even in your absence, you need something more. You need to master the silent language of results. Most people vastly overestimate the impact of what they say and dramatically underestimate the impact of what they consistently do. They believe influence comes primarily from articulation when it actually flows from demonstration. Consider two individuals offering similar business advice. The first speaks eloquently about entrepreneurial principles, using compelling stories and memorable phrases. The second says less but has built 3 successful companies from nothing, overcoming significant obstacles along the way. Who would you trust with your investment? Whose advice would you follow? The answer reveals a fundamental truth about advanced influence. Credibility through consistent action trumps clever communication every time. This principle applies universally. The parent whose life embodies the values they espouse influences their children far more than the parent who merely talks about those values. The leader who consistently demonstrates commitment to the team's mission creates more buy-in than one who only gives inspiring speeches. The professional whose work consistently exceeds expectations influences decisions without needing to argue their case. I once studied a CEO who rarely spoke at company meetings yet commanded extraordinary respect throughout the organization. When I asked employees why they held him in such regard, not one mentioned his communication skills. Instead, they pointed to his consistent pattern of sound decisions, his willingness to take responsibility when things went wrong, and his habit of giving credit when things went right. His influence didn't come from what he said but from what he repeatedly did. His actions created a language more eloquent than words. This silent language of results has several distinct advantages over verbal persuasion. First, it bypasses natural skepticism. In an age of endless marketing and empty promises, people have developed powerful filters against persuasive language. They've been disappointed too often by the gap between what's said and what's delivered. But results slip past these defense mechanisms. They speak directly to the observational part of the brain that says this person does what works. No argument needed. Second, results answer the most important question in any relationship. Can I trust you? While words can make promises, only consistent action over time can build genuine trust. Trust isn't a feeling, it's a conclusion based on evidence. Each time you do what you say you'll do, each time your actions align with your stated values, each time your results confirm your claims, you provide evidence that builds trust. And here's what makes trust so powerful. Once established, it accelerates everything. Decisions that would normally require lengthy discussion happen quickly. Opportunities that would be closed to others open for you. Resources that would be guarded become available. I worked with a businessman who operated in an industry notorious for broken promises and missed deadlines. When he first started his company, he made an unusual commitment. Every project would be completed on time, or clients would receive a significant discount. For the first 2 years, this commitment cost him dearly. Unexpected challenges meant numerous discounted projects, but he never wavered from his promise. By year 3, something remarkable happened. While competitors were fighting for every contract, spending enormous resources on sales and marketing, his company had a waiting list. His reputation for reliability had created a preference that no sales pitch could match. His influence in the market didn't come from persuasive proposals or clever advertising. It came from the silent language of consistent results that answered the crucial question, can I trust you? The third advantage of this results-based influence is its durability. Persuasion based on words is ephemeral. It fades quickly and requires constant reinforcement. Influence based on demonstrated results endures even in your absence. Think about the recommendations you make to others. When you suggest a restaurant, product, or professional, what criteria do you use? Almost certainly you base your recommendation on your experience of results, how the restaurant served you, how the product performed, how the professional delivered. Your words become an extension of someone else's results. This is how results-based influence extends beyond direct interactions into broader networks. But building this type of influence requires something most aren't willing to invest: time and consistent performance. There are no shortcuts to credibility. It's built decision by decision, action by action, result by result. The question is, are you willing to play the long game? Are you willing to focus on building a record of results rather than just crafting persuasive messages? This brings us to another dimension of advanced influence, developing presence that commands respect. Presence isn't charisma, though they're often confused. Charisma draws attention to itself. Presence creates space for genuine connection and exchange. You've encountered people who possess this quality. When they enter a room, the energy shifts. When they speak, others listen. Not because of volume or drama, but because their words carry weight. They don't demand attention, they command it through the quality of their being. What creates this presence? It flows from several sources we've already discussed: personal mastery, strategic thinking, and demonstrated results. But it also requires something more: complete congruence between inner and outer realities. Most people present a curated version of themselves to the world. Their words, expressions, and actions are slightly disconnected from their true thoughts, feelings, and intentions. This creates a subtle but perceptible incongruence that others sense, even if they can't articulate it. The person of presence has eliminated this gap. Their outside matches their inside. What they think, what they say, and what they do are aligned. This congruence creates an authenticity that people instinctively trust and respect. I once observed a business negotiation between 3 parties with competing interests. 2 representatives spent hours presenting detailed arguments for their positions, using every persuasion technique imaginable. The third representative said relatively little until late in the discussion. When he finally spoke, his words were simple but delivered with such presence and conviction that they shifted the entire conversation. Within 30 minutes, an agreement was reached that largely reflected his position. Afterward, I asked several participants why his input carried such weight. Their answers were revealing. You could tell he completely believed what he was saying. Everything about him conveyed conviction. He wasn't trying to convince us. He was simply stating what he saw as true. His influence came not from persuasive technique, but from the presence that flows from complete congruence. His inner clarity created outer impact. This type of presence can't be faked or manufactured. It emerges naturally when you've done the inner work of clarifying your values, aligning your actions with those values, and eliminating the gap between who you are and who you present yourself to be. The person of presence doesn't need to raise their voice to be heard. They don't need to dominate conversation to influence outcomes. Their very being communicates something that commands attention and respect. Developing this presence requires rigorous self-honesty. It demands that you identify and eliminate incongruence between your thoughts, words, and actions. It requires the courage to be fully yourself, rather than a curated version designed to impress others. But the influence that flows from this authentic presence far exceeds what can be achieved through persuasive techniques alone. This brings us to another powerful principle of advanced influence: the compound interest of relationship building. Most attempt to influence others through isolated interactions. They focus on winning the current conversation, closing the immediate sale, or solving the present problem. The advanced practitioner of influence thinks differently. They see each interaction as a deposit in a relationship account that will pay dividends far beyond the current transaction. This perspective transforms how you approach every exchange. Instead of asking, "How can I get what I want from this interaction?" you ask, "How can I build trust and add value in ways that strengthen this relationship over time?" I watched a consultant build an extraordinarily successful practice without spending a dollar on advertising or promotion. Her method was simple yet profound. After completing each project, she would identify 3 additional ways she could help the client that weren't part of her contracted services. Sometimes these were quick problem-solving conversations. Other times they were introductions to helpful resources. Occasionally they involved small additional work at no charge. These relationship investments yielded extraordinary returns. Clients became evangelists for her services. Referrals eliminated the need for marketing. Her business grew entirely through the compound interest of strengthened relationships. This approach applies in every context where lasting influence matters more than momentary persuasion. The colleague who helps others succeed finds their own ideas more readily embraced. The family member who consistently supports others' goals finds more support for their own. The leader who invests in team members' development finds increased commitment to collective objectives. The compound effect of relationship building creates a network of influence that operates even when you're not actively trying to persuade. Your prior investments in others create receptivity that would otherwise require significant persuasive effort. This leads us to another dimension of advanced influence: creating systems that work while you sleep. The ultimate form of influence doesn't require your presence at all. It operates through systems that consistently deliver value and shape behavior, even when you're not there. Consider how the design of a physical environment influences behavior without saying a word. Well-placed trash receptacles reduce littering more effectively than signs requesting proper disposal. Intuitive product interfaces guide usage without instruction manuals. Thoughtfully designed workspaces foster collaboration without mandating it. The advanced practitioner of influence creates systems that naturally produce desired outcomes without constant intervention. I studied a management team that transformed a chronically underperforming division not through speeches or threats, but by redesigning the performance measurement system. Instead of the previous complex metrics that nobody understood, they implemented 3 simple measures directly connected to customer satisfaction and profitability. These measures were updated daily and displayed prominently. Team members could see exactly how their work impacted results. No additional incentives or pressure were applied, just clear, immediate feedback on what mattered most. Within 3 months, performance improved dramatically. The system itself created the focus and motivation that no amount of managerial persuasion had previously achieved. This systematic approach to influence applies in personal contexts as well. Parents who create home environments that naturally encourage reading foster literacy more effectively than those who merely talk about the importance of books. Individuals who design their physical spaces to make healthy choices convenient establish better habits than those who rely solely on willpower. The question to ask is, how can I design systems that naturally produce the outcomes I seek without requiring constant persuasion? This systematic thinking leads us to another powerful principle: leveraging strengths while neutralizing weaknesses. Most people approach influence by trying to eliminate their weaknesses, believing they must be well-rounded to be effective. The advanced practitioner takes a different approach. They build influence by leveraging their distinctive strengths while designing around their limitations. I know a business executive who recognized early in his career that he wasn't particularly charismatic or verbally persuasive. Rather than investing years trying to become something he wasn't, he focused on developing his analytical abilities to an extraordinary degree. His presentations lacked emotional appeal but contained insights so valuable that people sought them out. He paired himself with colleagues who excelled at communication, creating teams that combined deep analysis with compelling presentation. The result: his influence far exceeded what he could have achieved by trying to overcome his natural limitations. By focusing on his strengths while designing around his weaknesses, he created maximum impact with minimum struggle.